So hello and welcome to our ongoing Tarot On videos. This is number 51 and we are going to be taking a look at astral travel, astral projection, etheric travel, etheric projection, rising on the planes, inner guide meditation, projection into a sphere, remote viewing, and all of these things that are to do with Yesod on the Tree of Life. So I'm going to be doing some reading from the Magister today as well. And just for those watching this as a recording, I know you sometimes wave. So here's a wave especially for you. And here's another wave. And for those watching this as the live version, then we should have finished placing our two cards on top of each other. And what I did today was I just bound them together with my bit of paper, which has perseverance connections on this side, and it had in our sacred brings healing on the other side, because it's obviously made of the full sentence. So I sort of bound them together like that just for today. And interestingly enough, the two Philosopher's Stone cards that I pulled for my own personal meditation today was self and distance. Self and distance. So I took a picture of them on a globe just to demonstrate that the self has no distance. And we can see this very clearly in those two images. So what are we going to do today? I might read a little bit from Tarot Time Traveler. We'll see how we do, strangely enough for time. But I wanted to start with a little personal story before we get into the astral projection stuff, and we're all going to do an exercise together as well over the next few new routine that I'd like to adopt as we start to make our gradual descent into the planes of lockdown here. Yeah, so we're going to do this experiment together over the next few days. If you're watching this as a recording, you will be able to sort of take part in it, even after the effect. But it will be very good for those watching this as live. And yeah, I do also hope that everyone is doing okay. Here in the UK, we are now testing a contact and tracing app on the Isle of Wight, I believe. And I believe that's going to be phased out to our mobile phones so that they can start to release the lockdown and be able to still keep a tight track on things if there's further occurrences of any outbreak of the virus, that that they can close it down fairly quickly, because they'll be able to track and trace people accordingly. So, the name of that deck, it's called the Philosopher's Stone Oracle, the Philosopher's Stone Oracle, but it is out of print. It goes on eBay sometimes for between $80 to $300, depending on the condition and where, yeah, just depending on whether anyone sees it and buys bids for it or anything. So, right, yeah, I just wanted to tell you a personal story. When I was very young, one of the, there were several influential children's stories, and some people in the UK might recall these, that one of them was Joe 90, and the other was the Tomorrow People, And Joe 90 was pretty cool, because Joe 90 was a secret agent, but he was just a young boy, and he went into this sphere that used to cycle around him, and he had these glasses on, and they would program his brain with any skill. It was actually, come to think of it, it was the precursor to the Matrix in a sense. in that Joe 90 could be, he could be anything. He could be an airline pilot, he could be a doctor, he could be just any job you wanted. Joe 90 would put these glasses on and he would immediately have these abilities. And oh yeah, the music is instant nostalgia. But I love Joe 90 because I thought, wouldn't it be good if you could reprogram your brain in order to be able to do different things? And similarly with the Tomorrow People were seen, again, it was a precursor to the X-Men, and a sort of idea that in the future, human beings would be able to communicate telepathically, that they would have psychokinetic abilities and all sorts of things, predictive abilities. But these were outliers to that future evolution, and they were young people who had a special base and everything else. And the Tomorrow People I found very influential as well, because I thought, wouldn't it be great if you had these powers? And so when I was quite young, I decided that that if there were Tomorrow People, and that was a potential future for human beings, then perhaps I could get a head start by practicing. So I asked my grandmother, who I spent time with at the time, for a candle. And when she asked me what it was for, I told her I was being taught by my comics to make a survival kit. With some silver foil and an apple and a candle and some string and a safe, so I could go fishing with it or something. But what I actually used to do was borrow some matches, say borrow in its loosest possible sort of 7-year-old version of the word, and go into the sort of, there was like a little garage area where it was quite sheltered, but it was outside. I used to light the candle and I used to sit in front of it and try and extinguish the candle with the power of my mind. And of course, I would sit there for 5 or 10 minutes and nothing would happen. And I'd get bored and I'd then go and do something else. And the following day I'd go out and practice. And it didn't work for ages. And then I started to think, well, maybe just the fact it doesn't work now is because no one has ever practiced this their whole life. And so I thought, right, I shall practice this until I can do it. I'm sure that's the only criteria for it failing, the fact that no one has ever really bothered to keep practicing something that fails first 10 times or 30 times, 50 times or whatever. So I'm still practicing, and I'll let you know the moment that the candle blows out, just with the power of my mind. I still think it's worth practice. Now, having said that, I want you to practice 2 things over the next few days as we go into our little practice of an astral trip. I think both of these are mentioned in the Magister, but the first one is, well, both visualization exercises of a kind, and they both teach us something different. And they're very simple. The first one is to close your eyes, and if you imagine a dice, a simple die, and it has the dots on it for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you can imagine a die that you use in a board game in your head, and I just want you to close your eyes and imagine that you can see the number 5 facing you as you look at dice. Okay, so you can see there's usually 2 dots and 2 dots like so, and then there's a dot in the middle as well to make 5 dots. Okay, so I want you to imagine that you can see that. Now on a dice, every opposite side adds up to 7. So if you imagine that you can see 5 on the other side of the dice, you know that there's the number 2. That's how dice are made. And similarly, if you could see the 6 facing you as you look at the dice, then you can see, you can imagine that on the other side there's the 1. Okay, hey, someone's got a dice icon, brilliant. Now, does that look about right? Yeah. The 1 would be at the bottom, 5 would be left on that icon. That if you're watching this as a recording, you won't be able to see the comment stream, so this may not make any sense. Someone's put a logo of a dice emoji onto the chat, and so 4 would be on the other side of the 3. So you can tell what the opposite side is because it adds up to 7 in all cases. Now, what I want you to do is imagine with your eyes closed that you can see the dice and you can roll it around almost inside your head, so you can mentally roll it and see which number is on top or is facing you as you look at it. Okay? And then what I want you to do, and this will take a bit of practice without mentally cheating, is as you look at the dice inside your own head, you need to break free of your conditioning of visualization, because you're conditioned in visualization practice by what we see. We expect things to look like what we see, and we're used to it because we spend all of our time astrally traveling in this world, projecting into it, making of it what we can. And then when we close our eyes, we tend to do the same sorts of things. Now, what I want you to do is see if you can break free of that matrix and in your mind be able to see all sides of the dice at the same time and hold it so that you can see every single side of the dice simultaneously inside your own mind. Now, don't cheat by rotating it really fast or imagining that you're zipping around it or anything else. You have to change your whole state of mind in order to just hold it. And sometimes it might be very brief, a bit like lucid dreaming is sometimes when you get it for a moment and you wake up, because it's difficult to maintain the first few times. You have to get used to it. And the way you get used to it is by a bit of practice, just a bit of practice. So the way I started to do it was I realized that my awareness, more like a sphere looking inwards, that my awareness was coating the sphere around the dice, and therefore the dice was inside every aspect of my awareness. That's how I sort of tricked my brain eventually into doing it. And then, no, not as if it's transparent, it's a physical dice, just like in the real world, but you can see it from all points. Unlike the real world, where you can't, because you only have 2 eyes and you have to look at it from a particular location and a particular distance, in your imagination, you don't have to do that. But because we're conditioned and habitual is our exterior way of looking inside our own representation, you have to break that. Sort of surround it, yes, with your awareness, but you'll know it when it happens. You'll suddenly see all sides of the dice as a solid object, and then sometimes you'll just break out of it. So I'd like you to practice that on and off over the next few days while we start to look at what we can do with our astral travel. Exactly. However you do it, the only trick is to see the dice in your, you can't see it unfolded. It has to be an absolutely solid 3D dice that you have to change your awareness, not the dice. Or your representation of the dice has to stay the same, but your awareness It's a bit like in the Matrix where it says, free your mind, free your mind. That's what you have to do. And I hope it will demonstrate how your imagination and your visualization is very different on the inside than the outside. And yet it's still conditioned a little bit by the outside. Make sense? So I'd like you to practice that for me. The second exercise, and you can do this at the same time, well, not literally at the same time, but in parallel to the first exercise, is what I call stopping time. Find a ticking clock, find metronome. If you go onto YouTube and type in metronome, you'll get metronome beats, and listen to it. And this is a great one for doing while you're waiting for something to happen, like you're in a waiting room with a ticking clock or something like that. What I want you to do is listen to the ticking clock and listen for the seconds. So it's like tick, 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 tick. And then I want you to stop time. Find the space in between the seconds. Literally, in your head, imagine that you can expand time within the ticking of the clock. Okay? Within the ticking of a clock. And again, you'll know it when it happens because something very strange will happen. And if you're in doubt whether it's the thing that I'm talking about has happened, then that's not the thing. You'll definitely know it when it happens to you. And again, it might take several days, weeks, maybe longer. It's a bit like one of those 3D images where you have to defocus your eyes in just the right way. So exactly as Michael was saying, so blinking your eyes at the same time. With this one, though, what we're doing is we are changing our mental state in order to demonstrate that our mental state is both very different on the outside and the inside, but also, this is very important, that we can control it, that we can work with it and intervene with our mental model in order to effect change. And it's very, very important with what we've done. So Sharon's tried it, and it actually slowed the clock down. People do say, oh, a watch kettle never boils and so on, but they never think, unless they decide to take some acid or something, whether you can change that, whether you can actually play around with that. I used to practice a different method to this one once I got used to that one, of getting onto an airplane for a long distance flight, say to Australia, and I get on the airplane and then I get off the airplane and 5 seconds would pass. And I used to do that in my head and get off the plane, and it would feel like 5 seconds passed. And once the lady next to me said, we had a very long haul flight, and the lady next to me said, but you did not even go to the toilet. Are you okay? Because I just zoned out, got on the plane, zoned out, got off the plane, and it finally sort of felt like it was 5 seconds. So you can play around with time in different ways. Yeah, so those are the two things, and there's a reason why I give those two exercises primarily, because there's lots of visualization exercises you can do, but these two, one is about space and the other is about time. One is about space and the other is about time, and that's what we're going to be messing around with in our own awareness as we talk about astral travel and so forth. So astral travel, etheric travel, the astral body, the astral double, the doppelganger, inner guide meditation, visualization, rising on the planes, the Enochian ethers, and so on. What are all of these things? Well, where I'd like to start is just by reading briefly a rather convoluted bit from the Magister, but I wanted to set it up just as an example of what we're going to talk about and what we're going to do. I'd say to practice these just a few minutes at a time. The important thing with these sorts of practices is do them in a way that you can do them. Never set yourself a practice to fail, not to begin with anyway. Always set it so that you can achieve it, even if it's only a small thing, and then build up based on your achievement. There's so many people who just deliberately set things to fail at, whereas it's a lot easier just to say, well, you know, I'll just do this simple thing today, but at least I've achieved it. And then you add to that, like building up weights in gym or something like that. You don't walk into the gym usually and, you know, try something impossible and know, this is not for me, unless you don't want to go to the gym. So this is from the section called Considerations on the Divisions of the Soul in the Magister. And I'll need my glasses on for this, if I may. So this is basically to set up a model for what we're going to be doing with astral travel. It's important to understand where we're going to go. There's so many people who go, oh, I did astral travel. And you say, well, where do you go? And they have no idea. And you think, well, that's a bit like saying, oh, I've just jumped into this pit and I've no idea what's in it. I mean, it could be fun on occasion, but not necessarily if you're claiming to know what you're doing. So all cosmologies include attempts to describe and model the elements that constitute the human experience. Their complexity and lucidity vary from culture to culture, and often models of variations on a theme or expanded versions of earlier systems. It is useful to study at least one system, like the Tree of Life, for it provides us with a stable comparison to our ongoing experience and acts as a placeholder for process and matter. The simplest model might well be that implied in Descartes' famous dictum, cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. His model further includes a dubious proof of the existence of God, thereby composing the most basic dualistic system of self and God, which may be seen as separate entities, ultimately identical entities or entities of which one is the enclosure of the other. The self is one basic experience of the human psyche, in that it is that to which we constantly refer our experiences. And actually, this is quite interesting that I got the self and distance thing this morning. Both in our environment, e.g., I am having a cup of tea, and in the inner world, e.g., I am feeling happy. It is impossible to define these two worlds as separate, except in our mundane experience, in that the so-called external world is in part, if not in totality, an experience equally generated by our own internal world. You know, a blue mood makes a blue day. In Kabbalah, this is indicated by the separation of Tiferet, self-consciousness, to Malkuth by Yesod, the persona. Our thoughts, Hod, and emotions, Netzach, constantly alter the processes of Yesod, the ego, in acting as an interpreter of the environment, such that what we perceive is, in fact, our shared version of the world, not the actual world itself. The philosopher Kant expressed this as the senses never and in no single instance enable us to know things in themselves, but only their appearances. And as these are mere representations, all bodies, together with the space in which they are, must be held to be nothing more but mere representations in us, and exist nowhere else than merely in our thought. The actual world is termed by Kant as the Ding and Sik, the thing in itself. The medieval Kabbalists, such as Abraham ibn Ezra, followed on from the Neoplatonic school of Plotinus in utilizing a threefold division of the functions of the psyche. These were nephesh, meaning breath, spirit, soul, persona; ruach, meaning wind, spirit, ghost, disposition; and neshama, breath, soul, life, living creature. Then I go on basically to explore how these models make sense. Now, in the Tree of Life, we then place the 4 levels of the soul into the 4 worlds that we talked about before with our 4 ways of reading tarot: literal, symbolic, extended, and secret, up through the 4 worlds of seeing a tarot card. If that makes no sense to you, go back and revise over the last 50 episodes of this series. But we can place them in the 4 worlds as Yechida, meaning point, which is the essence of the soul; the Chia, meaning the creative impulse of the Yechida, so the will is in the first world, this singular point like Ketha, and then it has an essence or an extension that then comes out into the creative world. Then Ruach, which is our mind, or what we call in the Western system our spirit, and then our Nefesh, or Neshama, which is the soul, which is the sort of animal soul. And basically, the Kabbalists sort of had this idea that, say, when you die, that your Nefesh vanishes first, because that's bound to the body, but your sort of second level of existence hovers around for a bit, and that's like the spirit or the ghost that's talked about in, say, Jewish folk tales and so on. Now, that sounds complicated. In English, we usually say, oh, we have the spirit and the soul, and the spirit is something like that goes in and out, and the soul is something that we have somewhere inside us. And the Kabbalists have 4, sometimes 5 levels. But the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, had the best system, in my view, because they had 12, at least 12 levels of human being. And they all had their own glyph, their hieroglyph. So the cat, and no one has any idea of how the ancient Egyptians spoke. So any pronunciation, including the word Thoth, is always going to be a best guess at how it was actually said. And don't get me started on that, because there's a whole line of reasoning for why I think Thoth should be pronounced Hoot. But cat in ancient Egyptian means, was shown by a fish icon, glyph, hieroglyph, and that was the body. So the cat was the body. And there was the Sahu, which was illustrated by a mummy, and that was the spiritual body. So you had a body, but also a spiritual body. And then the Ka, which was your image or your double, but on the next world up. Then you had the Ba, which was your spirit soul. The Kabed, which was your shadow. They had a word for your shadow or your aura. Then your Ak, which was the bright spirit. The Sekhem, which was the vital power. Your Ren, which was your name, and that was your secret name, your existence as a being encapsulated in your name, which I would think similar to your magical name. The Hati, which was your whole heart. The Ab, which was your will. The Tet, which was your soul, and your Hamatet, which was a radiating sun, and that was your unborn soul. So the ancient Egyptians had a wonderful series of 12 levels. Now, the reason that that's quite interesting, and as I explain in the Magister, is not much it's complex for its own sake. It allowed people, and particularly Florence Farr, who wrote a little essay called Egyptian Magic, and she used those models in order to explain, yes, indeed, the car for Gifford Hillary, so, yeah, and Dennis Wheatley. Those are in the Magister. Those are in the Magister. Basically, where was I? Oh, blah 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 blah. Yes. So it allowed Florence Farr to develop a model for how ritual works. And so she said that basically the ritual, the physical action of the ritual, activates your body. And so your physical body is engaged in the ritual. And as a result, that sets up a resonance with your next body out. And your next body out then is responsive to the next level up, which is the symbolic world. So then the symbols in the ritual then act on your next body out, and they resonate, and because they're resonating with what your physical body is doing, then they set up a resonance. And basically she developed this wonderful, elegant, simple, relatively simple model of how magic actually works. But to do so, you have to have the context. We have about 12 levels, and that we resonate through those levels. So that's the context in which I want us to explore what I'm going to refer to globally as astral travel. What we are going to do between a lot of us is we are going to do an experiment that I've done several times before with different groups. The first time I did this was just with friends when I was about 17, I think. And 4 of us did this. And we had quite a good result with it. So I've repeated it several times with different groups. And this is a great time to be doing it. We are going to do it in our sleep. So I don't want to take up more time than I need to of your time. So you can do this in your sleep. But we have to practice a couple things first. So practice the dice thing, practice the ticking clock thing. And what I want you to start to do is, as you go to sleep tonight, or tomorrow night, if you're watching this in Australia, yesterday, sort of, is to visualize a figure in front of you as your perfect astral self. Okay, I want you to visualize the person, a figure in front of you as your perfect astral self. Now, mine looks a little bit like Doctor Strange in the comic books and the recent Marvel films. And so he has a wonderful cape, well, not quite a cape, it's more of a robe, and big collars, and full of energy and stuff like that. And I saw a wonderful fancy drawing a long time ago of a robe that had all of the elements on it. So it had fire on the bottom that went into water, that went into steam, that went into mountains. And that's what I have on the robes of astral form. Yeah, you can visualize the form exactly as you want as an ideal. But I want you to practice that tonight so that we can do something with it tomorrow night, okay? And this is your journey, and don't put me in it anywhere, because I'm going to be doing something else in order to prepare for us to make a group connection over the next couple of days. So that's what we're going to do. And I don't want to give you too much head start, because I just want you to practice your visualization and visualizing your perfect self. But I want that perfect self to be in front of you so that you can see their back. Okay, you can see the back of them, and you keep at least like 6 foot distance from them, a sort of inner social distancing. Okay. So that's what, no talking needed, just have this perfect moment of strong visualization, build it up, open your eyes, close your eyes again, build it again, and don't do anything else other than that for the moment. Again, there's 100 variations of all of this sort of thing, but I just want us to do something really concise, reasonably simple, so that we don't have to be discussing the complexity of what we're doing more than we need to. Okay, just yourself ahead of you, floating in the void, like in a video game. Yeah, a third person, is it third person shooter game, where you're sort of looking down at the figure that's running around. That's exactly what we're going to do to some extent, but there are a few tricks to come tomorrow. But tonight, that's all I want you to do. Okay, makes sense, everyone? If you have no interest in this, and if you're just interested in the conceptual stuff, then yeah, do look up the levels of the soul according to Kabbalists, the levels of the soul in ancient Egypt. It's all very relevant stuff to what we're doing. Okay, now, over the next few days and few weeks, based on some things from yesterday, what I'd like us to do as the sort of online order original hermits, and those watching this as a recording can join with this as well, is what I'm going to do is we're going to break these sessions down so that I'll probably, there'll be a gap on Wednesdays so that I can have a sleep and we can practice things. So I'm going to recast practice work so that we can have a Wednesday for people to practice something, and that's I'm going to build that into it. And then the weekends I won't do a session, and again there'll be either practice or reading for the weekends, so that on the Monday sessions I'll pick up with what I've left you to do over the weekend if you're interested. And then over the next couple of weeks, I don't quite know what's going to happen in the UK, and no one does yet. We're going to have a review, government review on Thursday, and then apparently the roadmap of how we're going to undo our lockdown will happen on Sunday. And that might not be dated. It might not be, what's the word, set in stone as to when. But what I'd like us to do is I'll probably continue to the sessions as we come back down our flight and everyone else gets back into the new normal, so that the Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays for maybe a couple of weeks. And then I've got something in mind, and we're having some discussions as to what we might be able to do in the future, and hopefully it'll be of interest and fun for all of us to continue to build our little sort of group within a group within a group over the coming weeks, months and even years. So yeah, some places have already opened and some places are in different states, different places and states. But bear in mind that we will have something for us to do and continue to do as an ongoing basis over time, because, you know, you have all been company to me as well as I've been company to you, and I hope we've been company to each other. And there are some ideas floating around, and I think a couple of them are really good ones for what we could do with ourselves in the very near future. So I'll share more of that as we go along over the next week or so. So I'd just like to read a bedtime story, something from Tali Time Traveller. And just sharing personal. I know, for example, Tali is not very vociferous in groups on social media, but this was one of the books when people ask us occasionally about, how we write books together and stuff. Usually it's, it's a very different process for each book, but in this one, at the time I was undergoing a bit of a bad personal time, and there was good reason for that, and I had to sort out a lot of stuff that I'd not done too well in my life with at that point. And Tali wrote a massive section of a lot in here, so just a shout out to Ms. Goodwin for that. And one of the things we had a load of fun with in writing the book was introducing vignettes into fictional vignettes into non-fiction books, which Llewellyn seemed to have taken to heart since. I've seen a couple of their recent tarot books have got vignettes at the start of each of the chapters. But what I wanted to share with you, let's have a think, is one of the vignettes, because they are very timely, shall we say. Let me just find one here. Right, okay. So I'll read this one then. So this is, so each of the vignettes takes us in time. This is why the book is called Tarot Time Traveller, through different sections of cartomancy, So this one picks up in the 17th of February, 1800, Edinburgh, Scotland. We are time travelling again. It is almost 10 years since Robert Burns visited this city for the last time. And we walk by the Canongate Brewery, which has been built by Staines. In just 3 years from now, William and Dorothy Wordsworth will visit the city. Meanwhile, the place is growing at a huge rate, with more than 80,000 new people overall. And shortly there will be much demolition and plans for a second new town. Turn off the Colton Road and continue under the arch, reading Campbell's Close, tucked behind Cowgate and the Royal Mile. The air is dense with the sweet smell of barley being boiled and the more bitter aroma of boiling hops. Down the lane we find a cart is being loaded with piles of freshly printed chapbooks. These are cheap pamphlets for sale across the city to a public hungry for accessible news and stories. This particular car outside the presses of J. Morton, and whilst no one is watching, we browse through the newly published pamphlets. We first pick up a copy of a full account of the landing and arrival of the Roman prophet Enoch, who apparently was brought from Rome to Portsmouth overnight by an angel. Whilst intriguing, this is not what we are looking for today. A further look through the cart and we find our target, a second edition copy of Flamstead and Partridge's Fortune book. It is unlikely that these names bear any relation to the real author or text or authors, but that is to be expected this time. One similar fortune-telling book in the cart gives a history of its author, Mrs. Bridget, or Mother Bridget, as, quote, someone whose name has been forgotten by history, but is known to those who remember her. Bridget apparently lived in a hole in the ground and smoked a pipe, quote, of tobacco she was exceedingly fond. Visitors to her would be surprised by the various small animals that would creep out of her clothing. And whilst she had, quote, more money than was sufficient to maintain her, her later years were plagued by ill health, and she cut a, quote, terrifying figure in her lonesome walks, surrounded only by animals. There were many such Mrs. at the time, fake people created to sell just a few more pages of their copied materials. There are many such copies and versions of these fortune-telling pamphlets: the New Fortune Book, the Only Real Fortune Teller, the Tree of Fate, the Spay Wife, and some more. Some cover brief dream interpretation and the reading of moles, lines on the hand or the face. We will also pick up a copy of the Spay Wife in our time travels, as it includes a version of the symbolism of coffee grounds that we will meet in a later chapter on Lenormand cards. For now, let us return to our time pod and look over our second acquisition in our journey, the Fortune Book by Flamsteed and Partridge. Now, the reason that I read that is because that story, that vignette, introduces Flamsteed and Partridge, which was the very first written down meaning of cards, of playing cards. It's the first published version that we have, consistent one anyway, of what the cards meant. And the interesting thing at the time was that at the time, the verses for the cards were different for men and women. That there were 2 lines for men and 2 lines for women. So the interpretation of each card was dependent on whether you were male or female. We put it in here to say we are particularly fond of the buzzy type titles of the chapbooks of the time. See, nothing changes. There's nothing new under the sun. Even back then, there were clickbait titles for these chapbooks. My favourite, well, some of our favourites are Heliogabalus's Magic Tablets, a never-failing key to the future fortunes of inquirers. And there was also the Silent Language, or How to Discourse Without Speaking, and various other secrets worth knowing. I want to add in brackets, you won't believe, number 5. But it was great that at the time that they were selling these fortune books. And the thing with that, and where we're going to go in our story over time, I just have something to say about Lulu. I'll come back to that in a second on the chat here in the recording and the live version of this. As we make our descent back down into the lands of Unlock down here, we'll be discussing the history of tarot and different methods from different times. And the fortune books were basically an Italian version of fortune telling books, where you picked like your own adventure. So you rolled up, you drew a card, you went to a particular section of the book, and so on, and you worked through these huge books. I went to one at the Royal Society to look at one, and they got this book, and it must have been about 250 years old. And I opened the front, and a whole page came off in my hands, and I sort of put it back, and I asked the assistant to come over, and I said, can you take the book out of the box for me? I don't think I should be telling this story in public. And he took the book out, and the page came off in his hands, and I looked at him and I said, I won't mention it. And we looked at each other like, yeah, we'll keep this a secret, shall we? But those books were the precursors of tarot cards, because what actually happened is in those books, you used playing cards and dice to wend your way through the massive great book to come up with a fortune that was given to you in the end. And then someone at some point thought, why do we have to have the book? Why can't we just give meanings to the cards directly, pull the cards, and then we don't have to sell these massive great books? And that's really how the whole fortune-telling cards came into being. They were a shortcut, really, for the fortune books that predated them by quite some time. So we're going to do a little bit more history and look at some actual methods as we go along. So hopefully today I've given you a brief model of what we're looking at. Levels of the soul, levels of reality, 12, 10, 5, 8, it doesn't really matter. And we're going to work with that by practicing inner visualization and sense of time. It's different on the inside than the outside. So practice with your dice, practice trying to blow out a candle with mind, but spend the rest of your life doing it. And listen for the time in between ticking seconds. These are all useful things to practice. But in the meantime, practice seeing your perfect astral body in front of yourself, looking at it from behind. Exactly. I've got some photos of the fortune books. I'll see if I can share them over the next couple of days in the Facebook group. Okay then, so I just wanted to have a quick mention about Lulu. Lulu, we've just done a massive trade and screwed it up royally in the middle of a pandemic, and it's been over a week, and I'm still, my account and many other accounts on Lulu has been totally screwed up. And I'm thinking it's a good time to move some of our materials to Amazon, where most of our materials for self-publishing. So I advise you not to use Lulu just at the moment, because there's no guarantee you'll get a book, there's no guarantee it'll be printed directly, and there's no guarantee you will receive any income from it either at the moment. So I'm just warning on the May as we speak, 2020, not use Lulu at the moment. Yeah, and looking at your own figure from behind yourself. So look ahead and see your ideal body in front of you from behind, so that you can see your own back and your sort of pointed, your face is pointed forwards away from you. Okay. Okay, thanks all for your time and attention. Good night, hermits, and look after yourselves, look after each other. We are on the upswing of this, even though we may be descending back down into it. Be well, yes, until we meet again. Take care. Bye for now. Yes, Patricia, even though you're getting emails from Lulu, go onto their Facebook page at the moment and you'll see hundreds of very upset people with problems still at the moment. Okay? For now.